PAVE cohort, good morning. It is Saturday, which means it is time for Pilum Teaches DCS. We're going to be going over more things with the F-4 Phantom 2. And we're going to be probably starting over with the Phantom 2 here for the next week or so, as we cover all of the different features of the jet individually in a little more structured way, but still open to whatever it is you guys need. So feel free to ask questions in chat. That is always encouraged, and we will cover things accordingly there. So let's go ahead and flip things over, get into the game itself. We will do our walk around the jet, talk about what we're doing today. This is, of course, our workhorse, the F-4 Phantom. And starting with the outer pylons and working inboard, we have two AGM-12 Bullpup missiles. It's mirrored loadout on either side. These are B variants, which have the same explosive force as the A variant, but a different motor and propellant. It's really the only difference between the two. The C variant, which we're not carrying today, can only be carried on the inner stations, and it occupies the entire rail. You can't carry sidewinders with that due to fin collision issues. On the inner rail, we are carrying a defensive set of AIM-9L sidewinders and GBU-12 bombs. In the recesses, we're carrying AIM-7F Sparrows in 3 places and the PAVE spike pod in the 4th one. On the center line, we are carrying today the SUU-23 rotary autocannon. This is the same M61 Vulcan cannon that is in the nose of the jet, but has 1,200 rounds inside the drum, as compared to about 610 in the nose section of the jet. 2 can be fired simultaneously, but for our purposes today, we will not be using it that way. The SUU-23 is the better version of this Gunpod, as it is accurized to the pipper in the jet, instead of just kind of being a hope for the best and aim as you fire sort of affair. And of course, a close-up there of our PAVE spike pod in the forward Sparrow recess. Jet's already started. We've just been on pause, so let's go ahead and unpause. Grab our helmet. And while Jester's closing his canopy, we'll be taking our usual route up to the Yucca Pass training esplanade.
Gun unlocked. Lights out and stripes aligned.
Got plenty of things for us to be able to shoot over there. And as we get started and start making our way out that way, we will begin setting things up to start with the GBU-12s and the PAVE spiked pod. First thing I'm going to do is just give myself a navigation waypoint into the general area.
Overlord, 1-1, Bra, 001, 460 at 12,000 cold.
Hey, we planning to hit the deck on this one? Roger.
It should be enough time for that waypoint to appear in the list. So let's go ahead and go to navigation, divert, map markers.
Wilco. Steering set for diversion.
Now there is something else that we're going to need to know, and that is the general altitude of this area here, which is about 4,040 feet. And I'm just going to left alt and click there on the map so I have that ready on display back here. Because I'm going to be going into the bombing table with right control B. Because there is some important information we need to tell Jester to make this pod work easiest for us. The bombing table is a crucial piece of equipment there for the jet. Let's get turned around here on the right, there we go. Because there's a lot of things that you would need to either tell your Wizzo or possibly Jester if you're not using a human Wizzo, that needs to be programmed into the bombing computer. So we're going to be using target find because that's what we're going to be using for the pod. And we're going to select our weapon. It's GBU-12. And then the rest of these things you need to plug in to this upper part of the page, which will then give you derived statistics on the lower part of the page. Generally speaking, it's pretty comfortable to make a bombing run at about 450 knots true airspeed. The pilot's true airspeed gauge is hidden here behind the panel, just to the left of your gun missile selector, and armament status, and above your clock. In the back seat, it is on full prominent display in the front part of the jet, so you can really keep an eye on that for your pilot and let them know how they are doing compared to their intended run-in speed. There's no place in the back to set the run-in speed. That is for you, the human Wizzo, to remember. And Jester will provide speed calls saying that you're too fast or, too slow or right on the money. Release altitude is an estimate about where you want that bomb to come off the rail. Given the altitude that we've got going on around this place, I'm going to say about 13,000 feet. And here's where we put in our target altitude. And it doesn't need to be exact. Especially for the backseater, he's only going to be able to get that so close. But we can get close to within about 10 feet of it. And you can see that changing these values on top, hold short here for a minute. Changing these values on top changed the middle values. Now, if I was working with Trigger in the back seat, he can access the bombing table himself and plug these numbers in and get them himself, but working as a team and as a crew while he's busy heads down in the jet, as we jump to the back seat here, messing with this panel, which is the WRCS, I can be feeding him the values. So in this case, like the target's altitude, he needs to know that so that he can program the WRCS for the target altitude in MSL, which is mean sea level altitude, not above ground level. Based on the run-in speed that I have, it's going to change the drag coefficient. So 1.18 is about the drag coefficient for this bomb at that altitude and airspeed. We're looking at a total flight time of about 24 seconds. So it tells us how long after release we need to be in the area providing laser guidance for the bomb. And the ROR slant range is important because that's what the pod's going to be using to give me all of my cues to tell me that I'm in range to drop the bomb. Now, if we were dropping iron bombs or a ripple of bombs and we wanted a particular bomb to hit the target, we could change this. Like if I was dropping, let's say, 5 bombs in a stick, and I wanted the middle bomb in that one to be the one that's on target, I could set this to number 3, and it's going to have a release advance, so that way the bombs will fall off the jet a little bit sooner so that the first 2 bombs go beyond the target, the 3rd bomb hits the target, and the last 2 bombs trail the target, which is really good for a convoy of vehicles, and you just need to aim for the middle of the convoy. We're going to tell Jester enclose.
Got it.
As he programs the WRCS. Alright, let's go ahead and take off. Using the bombing table is an essential part
Engine's good. Airspeed off the
of
bed.
doing work with the F-4.
80 knots. 400
Most
knots.
of your bombing modes are going to make use of it, including any of the loft attacks that you intend to make with the Shrike.
Gears moving.
All right, we do have an ad break that's coming up here. We're just going to be doing a little bit of transit,
Gear up.
and when the ad break is over,
Flaps up.
we'll resume talking about the WRCS, the bombing table, and why those things are important.
All right, those are some nails. 2 o'clock. And nails. 2 o'clock.
Okay, so for those of you who are subscribed in some fashion somewhere, I'm just adjusting the brightness on my display. I have set my display to the TV mode, which is useful for Mavericks and any of the electro-optical guided weapons, and for the targeting pod. As we talked about last time, there are some binds that you need to make if you are using the pod by yourself without a human backseater. And that is the antenna control hand challenge button, the full action and half action modes on the trigger, and then of course the antenna hand control unit having a slew. You either need to bind the controls here as buttons, or bind an axis to the Wizzo mode if that's possible. Okay. The challenge button for the antenna control unit will control the zoom setting for the pod. Half action will cycle the pod's mode, which will allow you to slew that around and get lock onto a target, and full action will engage the laser. Talk about symbology as we get closer to the target area here. We are a little heavy given what we're carrying, so it's kind of a gentle climb out there for us. And since we got so many weapons to roll through, I am being a little conservative on the old gas there. Okay, so yeah, the bombing table. The bombing table is crucial for anything that you're doing in the jet that basically isn't either direct mode where you're just doing guesswork. Good example of that would be dropping high drag bombs. You can use the bombing table, and if you fly it as you program it, you should achieve much greater accuracy in where you want those bombs to go. But there are other expedients that you can use in order to drop your bombs on your target where you need them to go. People know what a good bombing run feels like, and as you're getting closer, the margin of error for missing is less. But if you're going to be dropping guided bombs or throwing lofted shrikes, anything that you kind of need to know where the target is on the ground, because the jet already knows what altitudes it's at, the jet already knows what airspeed it's at. So basically what you're doing is trying to provide the other points of data so that the mechanical computers and things on board the jet can go, this is good parameters. And that's what you're telling the bombing table. Whether you have a human wizzo in the back seat putting the numbers into the actual computer terminal, or if you're using Jester, especially if you're using Jester, you need to make sure that those things are in play. Otherwise, you won't hit your target. One of the things that we have done a lot here in the last few weeks, and I've turned it off for this particular run because we're not focused on it this time, is I had an SA-6 site out here by this little town, and we threw shrikes at it to kill it. And our hit rate on that is, I want to say we've hit almost every single time with the shrike. You can go back and check the footage to see that. I have not missed that SA-6 site very much with a lofted shrike. And a lot of that comes down to programming the WRCS, because you can change it to go for any of the other bombing modes. You can do WRCS AGM-45. All you need to know is where the target's altitude is. Is basically what it's looking at that point is, if the jet was moving at this speed and pulls up to a 30-degree angle, is that enough room for the Shrike to get to the target and then fall down on top of it and use gravity to guide it the last little distance? That's the math problem that it's solving. And that's what the bombing table is for. In the case of our targeting pod, it tells us where our release point is. Because if I were to target the ground, let me go ahead and do that here. We'll go half action on the trigger. We'll just find ourselves a spot. That one looks good. So we have solid lines here in the symbology. That means that we've got good laser ranging to the target. I'm gonna go ahead and save this for now. But if I were to hold the button down, so it's gonna make me actually go through with it there. It provides me with steering cue information at the top.
Ooh, there's 480.
Jester's telling me about the speed now, and the bomb fall line will start moving down.
490.
As those two lines intersect and then the bomb comes off the jet, the place that it will do that is 21,000 feet from the target. Because that's what we told Jester, what the rotor slant range should be. And that's what he's programmed into the WRCS to give the pod the most accurate work that it can do.
Copy that.
All right, so we're coming up on 20 miles to the target area. DT mode is about the only one that you can use reliably without doing anything in the WRCS, because it just uses the radar to provide all your ranging information. That looks like our town there. We'll get a little closer. There's our makeshift sand side. I turned off the low blow that's there for now. It's our buildings. Spark a battery. KS-19 battery. I think we're going to go with them first. And lasers on. Autopilot's off. Basically want to fly it.
520.
We're a little fast.
510.
You want to fly it so that those 3 dots are in the 12, 9, and 3 o'clock position. That will tell us that we are in
470.
good conditions.
460 knots.
That tone is going to get annoying. 460. Keep up the speed a little bit. Bomb fall line's coming up.
440, no, 430.
And pickle. Bombs off the jet. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. And that's a good hit. Got a little bit of flak come up after us. But the pod stayed more or less where I needed it to, and because I wasn't maneuvering extremely hard, stayed up, stayed on target there for us with very little extra input. I'm going to go ahead and reset it back to the 12 o'clock position. We will push out here to the east. And we'll come back again. And this time we're going to be aiming for the Shoka battery. That's sitting up on that hill there. You might see the 4 dots. Kind of in the center of the frame, just above the large tan square in the building. But we were able to drop those bombs from a higher, safer altitude, thanks to setting up properly the bombing table. I do like adjusting the TV clarity there, try and get rid of that bright spot in the center. That is kind of a constant game that you'll have to play with it. And what you do in the front seat does not change what happens in the back seat. The back seater has his own controls and should be adjusting them for their comfort. That should be about on target. Let's go ahead and zoom in with the pod and find our targets here. There they are. Good morning, Jolly. And I cycled through that too quick. All right, we're going to come off the target. If you press through the half and full action, if you use separate bindings, therefore, if you move through it too quickly, it won't engage the system correctly. So we will go ahead and extend here, and we will turn back around. Also not quite at our target altitude. It's going to be quick, but I think we can get him. I do like to acquire my targets from as far away as possible. Lasers on. That's looking good. Bomb fall line is already right about in position.
450 knots.
You're right on time for airspeed.
460.
A little fast. Bombs off the jet. I'm gonna zoom out so I have a little more wiggle room on the pod. It is easy to outrate the pod, especially this one, because it is not a modern pod by any stretch of the imagination. Good check. And the pod's limits are over here on this right-hand gauge, this line of sight gauge. Anywhere in the green, you can get the best movement out of the pod. Anywhere in the white is still technically possible, but nearing the edge of the limits there for the pod. You have more wiggle room on the left-hand side because the pod is carried on the front left-hand portion of the jet, so there's less of the jet to try and look through than if you make a right-hand turn. This is the opposite to the way most of the pods are mounted on jets today. Most of them are mounted on the right-hand side to allow for right-hand turns. All right, we still have 2 more guided bombs available, so I definitely want to take care of that Sparka battery. That's the next most dangerous thing to us. We'll come back around for him. Once we get these last 2 GBUs off the jet, we will switch over to using the Bullpup missile. Take out a couple more targets. And then follow up with using the Gunpod. Some aircraft will put it on the center line, but for a lot of aircraft it's kind of a waste because that's usually your heaviest pylon. So if you're going to be putting on big bombs or a large fuel tank or anything along those lines, you want that on a rack that can carry something that heavy. Where most of the pods are nowhere near that heavy, they can be carried a little further out on the wing. And, if it is out there on the edge of the wingtip, you're not looking through fins, bombs, anything else in the undercarriage. You can have a clearer picture if you're doing an orbit over a target and lasing for somebody else. Like, there's a few advantages to not having it mounted directly centerline. Harry's a little different in that regard, because that's really kind of the only place you can put that pod. But it's also a higher wing aircraft, so your wings aren't in the way, and neither are your stores usually. Some of it comes down to how the aircraft's constructed too. Like, if you put a pod on the center line for the F-14, you'd be looking through engine nacelles, anything, a gentle left or right-hand turn. So putting it out on a glove station gives it some actual visibility. Okay, let's get these Sparkas. We are in track mode. Lasers on.
Almost going ballistic, 530.
We're way fast, so I'm pulling the throttles back.
510 knots.
Trying to fly my dots. And then hand off the throttle so I can...
Passing through 490.
Bomb fall lines coming together. That little dot reaches a large line, it comes off the jet.
We're at 460.
Pickle. Coming off the zoom. And easing around gently to the left, so I have more room on that side to maneuver. And that's a kill. Lasers off. So yeah, definitely touching back on the bombing table. Setting that up as properly and as close as you can is going to give you the best fall line, because otherwise you might be dropping your bombs entirely too close to the target. And an older pod, especially like PAVE Spike, even the fast track pod has its limits for how far it can actually, or how fast it can traverse. So if you're releasing that close, you're going to need a lot of swing on that pod, and it's just not quick enough to keep up. And you'll come off your target and the bomb will miss. Yeah, and it does bring up a good point there, Jolly, too. We'll take a quick look here while we're turning around. The F-4, if it was clean, is a flat-bottomed aircraft. If I put a pot there on the bottom, you know, other than the physical presence of the wings at certain points, I could see a lot. But once you put all the stores and crap and everything else there, if the pod was sitting where the Gunpod is now, you know, if I look to the left, I'd be looking through the bomb rack that the GBUs are on, or through the missile rack where the Bullpups are sitting. Gotta help that line of sight out where we can. Oh, good Lord. I never went primary sync. Okay. Target area again. I think we're going to go after some of the tanks this time. There's one kind of right there. It's a little hard to see, but we'll brighten the picture up since we're looking at the ground.
490. Passing 500.
We're a little fast. I'm going to bring the speed down. I am in a slight nose down position because I'm trying to get the bomb to see the laser as early as possible for guidance. That way it's not, you know...
Easy, 490.
It's not spending so much time cruising through the air. Yeah, that bomb is hooked. I'll follow it down. And kersplat. Alright, so let's go ahead and switch to our AGM-12 Bullpups. They are fired in direct mode, so Jester will leave the pod turned on, but he will stop accepting commands and inputs for it. And we will talk a little bit about the Bullpup while we're cruising back around. So the Bullpup is one of those first-generation air-to-ground missiles. As such, it doesn't have a significantly large warhead, but it is on a motor. It uses a version of guidance called MACLUS, or Manual Command Line of Sight, and saw a lot of use with F-4s and with F-100s, especially during the Vietnam War. And this little hand control unit here for the pilot sends radio commands to the back of the missile to steer the missile onto the target. What it means is that this is a very hands-on weapon. This is one that is steered by the pilot. So functionally, it has some range limits that are just kind of built into the weapon. First off, you're really not going to hit anything any further out than about 10 nautical miles for a launch point. Secondly, you need to be behind the missile to guide it. So if you try and shoot it and then immediately maneuver away, you're not going to be able to steer the weapon any longer. However, you can offset a little bit, and this was a trick that we learned during the Vietnam War. As the missile has a large set of flares on the back that illuminate after launch to help show the pilot where the weapon is so he can steer it. The motor also produced a lot of smoke, and what North Vietnamese gunners tended to do was, you know, when they found an aircraft diving down on them and they saw that missile plume and it obscured the target.
What's our fuel looking like?
We're fine, Jester, calm down. They would just shoot up the plume, and the odds were pretty good you could hit the launching aircraft before the missile hit the target, and, you know, then throw the missile off and it could miss. We found that didn't work too well and had a lot of limitations with it, which is what led directly to electro-optical guidance and eventually the Maverick missile. So the Bullpup is the parent to the Maverick, which finally allowed for fire and forget, where you could get the missile to target an area, goes, yep, I see that contrast point, that's the picture that I need to hit, and then it will fly itself to hit the target, as long as it can continue to see it. Alright, so the defunct SAM site that's down there is going to be our next target, and we're going to use one of the Bullpups on that. I tend to leave my Pipper in either 17 or 45 mils depression, depending upon what other weapons I've been carrying and using. And since the weapon sort of droops as it comes off the rail, I will aim above the target and then bring the weapon down on top of the target. The main goal, with Macloss weapons is to try and align the flare with the target to try and hit it. Here we go.
It is a friend.
Rifle. You see where that missile kind of falls a little bit. Now I'm in control. And we got close enough to damage the target. Bullpup C, if you're using the big fat bullpups on the inner pylons, they've got enough destructive power that it's almost like pitching a 1,000-pound bomb into the zone. So you can really cause some havoc with that. But you do have to guide it all the way in. So your maneuvering is going to be a little limited while the missile's in flight if you have any hopes of accuracy whatsoever. That said, it is a fairly quick weapon to use. You don't have to wait 3 minutes for a electro-optical system to get charged up and ready to fire. You don't have to wait for anything to cool. You don't have to have any kind of a radar lock. You can just point and click. We're going to use our second Bullpup here on that armored group. That should be on this little pad out here. Same thing, aim above the target area and rifle. Close enough to cause some damage. Not really enough to destroy tanks, because we didn't hit them directly. But it is possible. Now to use the Gunpod, all you have to do is have the weapon selector set for gun for your air-to-air system. And if I were to tab off of it and select a different weapon system, you can see where the arm light goes out. If you have the actual gun selector up in addition to any of your gun pods, you will shoot all three of them together, but otherwise it uses the front trigger, just like you would for guns. The gun rate selector also applies. So if you have the guns in high or low rate, you can set that with that switch. But you do get about twice the ammunition using the gun pod compared to just using the nose gun. It's not as aerodynamic, it does cause some drag, so before people go all gung-ho about, oh, I can do super gunfighter shit with that, technically yes. And a lot of F-4 pilots, particularly Navy ones that didn't have F-4s that have guns in the nose, made use of gun pods a lot because that's all they had available. But then it also occupies a pylon spot. You can't carry fuel there, you can't carry bombs there. Usually set my gun pipper to about 25 mils for air-to-ground work. It's more going to be a reference points. I am going to watch for the tracers and make adjustments. I think the MTLBs are going to be our first target there with this. If you do need to use the pod, air-to-air mode in the radar,
New bogey, left 35 degrees, 24 miles.
You can be
22,500.
confident in the fact that it will actually move the pipper around
It's a friend, IFF checked
and
out.
give you good lead indicators there for the gun pod in air-to-air mode. Here we go. MTLBs are there at the end of the road. Trying to stabilize up here. And let's give them a burst. Nice long one there. And into the ground we go because I was fixated a little too much. That's okay, we do have other slots we can take. Expedience purposes, we will grab the one there at Creech. Ah, it's an A4 slot, not gonna worry about it then. Grab one from Nellis. Wasn't paying attention to where the plane was, and flying the plane is the
Stored heading will do.
first rule there on that. All right, let's go ahead and get ourselves
Roger.
cartridges.
Cartridges are loaded.
Change things up a little. We'll put the gun pods on the outer stations. While I was doing that, I was going to carry bigger bullpups there. And we'll carry some other iron bombs. Get a nice ripple going, so we'll bring the smaller bombs there.
Request rearming. Copy.
If you got the generators, I can... Okay.
Rearming complete.
Canopy down and locked. Lights out. Stripes aligned.
Okay, Jester should be well on his way to alignment, so I'm going to quickly jump in the back seat, pull the handle, and jump up front. That way, if he decides to leave the aircraft, he can take both of us together. So, alright, loadout change. We have our gun pods out on the outer pylons. We are carrying the much larger AGM-12 Charlies. As you can see, the size difference there. The smaller ones were much smaller than that pod, and these are almost the same size. And then 6 Mark 82s in the center line, so we can play with the bombing table and try and get the middle bomb and a stick to hit the target. Set up a second waypoint here for the unattended target range. Just waiting on alignment now. And then we'll be back on our way.
Alignment completed. You can go primary sync now. Ready to taxi.
Slats out, sir. Flaps down. Roger. Yes, sir. Chalk's out. Okay, sir. You're all set. Have a safe flight. Disconnecting.
Hey, we planning to hit the deck on this one? Alright.
Alright, let's go and set up our bombing table. This time I plan on using DT mode with Mark 82s. Release altitude, we'll call that 11,000 feet. Target altitude there is a little less, at 3,230 feet. Well, about a 20-degree dive angle. But I want bomb number 2 to hit the target.
Yes, sir. Gotcha.
I'm going to start with the Mark 82s. I'm going to set my ripple pattern to be a little longer so it's exaggerated a bit. And our quantity selector to 3. Well, we can get 2 passes out of it. And this time we are using the WRCS in dive toss mode, which does use the radar for ranging.
Roger. Roger.
If you sometimes saturate Jester with too many commands, he does not work fast enough, as Heapler has programmed in a human-like response time for telling him what he needs to do and then having him execute on that task. So if he's halfway through setting one setting and you told him a second setting, he will stop what he's doing and then set up the other setting. So just be careful with that.
Engine's good, airspeed off the peg. 80 knots. 101. 102. 103. I'm just kidding.
Left stick, try and get the nose up to about 10 degrees. And wait for the plane to fly itself. You're coming up.
Gears moving. Gear up. Flaps up.
Fly over the golf course. Part of Craig Road. Manch Manor. Start making our way home.
Oh, I'm showing nails, 11 o'clock. Roger. Steering set for diversion.
Okay, it's going to get set up for bombs. And since I'm not worried about aircraft at the moment, I'm going to set up for dive toss mode. Jester will put the radar in 10-mile bore sight. And and be ready for us there. While we transit, I'm going to take a brief AFK from the headset. I'll be right back. All right, back. Just had to open the window up there a little bit. Head tracking reset. All right, so DT mode. Dive toss is quite possibly your fastest acquisition.
All right, those are some nails, 2 o'clock, and nails, 2 o'clock.
I'm concerned about that. Let's ask AWACS what's going on.
Overlord 1-1. Uzi 1. Request bogey dope.
I beg to differ there, Overlord. Those are probably from Alamo, so I'm not going to be as worried. So dive toss mode is your fastest cast-like acquisition mode, short of you just being good at using direct. As with direct, as soon as you push the button, the bomb falls off the jet. And it just kind of does whatever it is the bomb's going to do. But with dive toss, you can either work with Jester or work with your Wizzo to identify a spot on the ground, which they will then capture with the radar, locking it up just like they would an aircraft. And then it will use the radar for ranging information. You can get very accurate without needing to use the bombing computer at all to attack a target. Where the bombing computer becomes useful is when we're doing what we're doing here, where I'm going to be using dive toss to execute on a target, but I want a different bomb in the stack to hit the middle of the target. So basically what I'm looking to do this time is we're going to be flying out here to this unattended target range, where there is a big old nasty SA2 site. In this hypothetical scenario, it is asleep and not really doing anything, so we're going to try and attack it before the crews can wake it up to try and engage us. Now, there's a few ways that we can attack that target. We can either aim for a point just short and just have the bombs ripple out in front of it, or we can try and ensure a target destruction by going, okay, I want bomb number 2 in a 3-bomb stack to hit the very middle of the group where the SAM's radars are. But if I set my ripple delay to, a distance, then I can put 1 bomb in front and 1 bomb behind it and really kind of bracket and saturate the whole area to ensure that they're dead. Since I don't have a whole lot of visible distance right there through the front of the aircraft, I'm going to go ahead and offset just a little bit. Try and find our target. Visually. What it means though is that I can lock up the middle of the target and let the bomb's ripple pattern do the rest of the work. In this case, it's about 40 milliseconds. So they are going to be spread a little far, and we're dropping 3 bombs. And as we've told Jester, we want the second bomb in the stack to hit the target area directly. At this point, most of the rest of our flying is a little irrelevant, but if we can get as close to where we can, the bombs will be that much more accurate, rather than missing by a variance of either their drag coefficient or the aircraft's own speed. As the range should be right, but other parameters might be off enough that could result in not quite hitting directly where we want them to go. Like right now we're doing 524 true knots, which is about 75 knots faster than we've told Jester the bombing computer should be on. There is our target area and the SAM site. We're going to roll in on it and start our run. Target the middle of the SAM site, and we're going to use our Jester contextual menu button as a single tap.
And captured.
And we've told Jester to capture that target area. I'm just going to keep it on the target area and then begin holding the pipper button. As dive toss, I'm going to slowly bring the nose up. Bombs are coming off the jet. And if we observe this target area, we should see one impact dead center and an impact fore and aft of it. And we kind of did. That second bomb detonated in the air. It was a little too close to the, or third bomb rather, detonated in the air. It was too close to the second one. But we absolutely had the one bomb hit before it, one bomb hit on target, and if that other bomb hadn't sympathetically detonated, it would have blown up out here in front of it. So I'm going to set it for a little bit longer of a ripple distance, try and get that bomb out of the way. The way you would set this up in the back seat is there are dials kind of hidden under the your front right knee, under that console, where you can set a release advance in milliseconds, which is where you would take the information off the bombing table, in this case 50 milliseconds. So you start dropping the bombs early enough that the intended bomb hits the middle of the target. We're going to aim for this little diamond group. Same thing, hold ahead and tell him to capture the target.
Captured.
And we will watch our lozenge. We were a little fast, which is why bomb number 2 is way out here, but bomb number 1, thanks to our pattern, destroyed the group. Especially with aircraft before a lot of really big precision guided munitions. Very rarely are you dropping single bombs on top of a target when they're just irons like that. Alright, let's go ahead and get set up for our bullpups. Actually, no, let's do bullpups last. Let's do the gun next. You have a couple of large target areas that the gun would be kind of ideal to shoot at, full of soft trucks. You can carry up to 3 gun pods in the F-4. Carried on the outer stations and the center line, which does give you a terrifying amount of gun-based firepower. And each one of those pods has 1,200 rounds in it. So if you wanted to not shoot all of your gun pods at the same time, you could really stretch out the gun food on that. Alright, so our target is going to be the larger group there to the right of the smoke. Gonna try and line up on it and we'll give it a good strafe. Steady out here. It's looking better. Switch to high rate. We'll come back and hit him again. Got quite a few there in that pass. Very useful against soft targets. Given the volume of fire, I have managed to kill up to about a BMP-2 with it. But anything significantly more armored than that, you're either going to need a lot more pipper time,
20,500.
a lot more luck, or some combination thereof.
Positive IFF, positive IFF.
And gun's empty. We did have it in high rate. We did do a couple of very long bursts in that. Alright, so let's finish out with the Bullpups. These are the heavier versions. Bullpup C's. But other than being bigger and heavier, they are operated exactly the same as the Bullpup B's or A's that we were using earlier. Pick out a nice target group here. I think that ring of targets. Follow up on that. Plenty of fuel left still. Alright, same thing, aim a little above the target and rifle. Kind of a noticeable weight shift there too with that one coming off the rail. And I think we'll follow up on the lozenge group that we were strafing with the guns. With our next bullpup. Go, and rifle. And steering it, bringing it down. A lot more blast frag on that one. Alright, let's go and set up for an approach on Creech. Save our weapons, make sure all of our stations are deselected. We will be bringing the pods back, though you can jettison those should you find yourself needing to for some reason. Seats elevated. Shutters closed. We'll go ahead and we'll set up for an overhead brake pattern at Creech. Overhead brake is very similar to a Case 1 approach for a carrier. And line up slightly right of the runway. A little fast here, so our turn is going to be a little rougher. And I'm trying to get us down to about 800 or 900 feet AGL. Cross about the midfield at 350 knots. And then we are in the brake. Speed brake comes out. I'll bring the throttles back, not quite to idle because the J79s don't respond to throttle up requests very well at a certain threshold. Gears coming down at 250 knots, flaps coming down, brakes coming in. And we're going to retrim the aircraft for landing. Roll out parallel to the runway. At this point, my Wizzo would tell me that flaps and slats are out, confirming everything's there. We can confirm that ourselves looking at the gauge there behind the wheel handle. And our wings are swept back just about 45 degrees. So as we shoot down the 45-degree line, we will turn back in for Creech. Monitoring our airspeed and everything here on approach. A little fast, pulling throttles back.
Okay, gear, flaps, pressure, warning lights, anti-skid.
Chute deployed.
Oh, dude, I hope the squad was watching because you effing nailed that landing.
Advantage of that overhead brake, just like a Case 1 landing, is that it does put you more or less right where you need to be if you execute on it well. You should be at altitude, near AOA, and on speed if it's done right. Alright, let's go and shut down the left engine. Holding the brakes down, call for our wheel chocks.
Roger. Yes, sir. Wheel chocks are in. Roger.
Okay, cold and dark the aircraft. Those steps are deployed. Which means that for now, my friends, that's going to go ahead and do it for today. We are going to be following up starting next week with a newer format for Pilum Teaches DCS. It's kind of interesting watching those spin. Very spinny. But the format we're going to go with, we're going to actually go through, starting up the jet and follow along with a week-to-week doing certain things with the jet, showing those things off. So hopefully, follow along or watch on VODs later. You'll be able to do all those things yourself as well. We'll encourage questions and everything else. We'll also get to see those things in practice. Hope you've enjoyed watching today. I've certainly enjoyed flying. And with that, always ask for consent. Try to communicate as best you can with your partners. Try to be genuinely decent human beings. And I will catch up with you next time. Thanks for watching, folks. Pilum out.